If you're making purchases, make them with a First Horizon commercial card. The report
They're full of candy corn, Twizzlers, and Reese's Cups, and your day is off to a good start. We have a very information-filled Student Achievement Committee meeting today, and very happy to welcome our Chief of Staff, and then we will also, and team, and we will also have our School Mental Health Improvement Plan update. And so I will open the meeting with a motion to approve our minutes from our last meeting.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries, and so I will turn it over to Dr. Robinson.
I was just going to, you did a great job this morning. It's a continuation of our one-on-one series. I think the Chief of Staff's team wants to do, will engage in some small groups in the boardroom, and so we'll turn it over to Dr. Robinson and his team.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wilson-Norman. Appreciate all your leadership and planning to make sure that these topics are presented to us. So, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. And Committee Chair Waters and esteemed board members, thank you for the opportunity to provide information with regards to the Chief of Staff departments, and I'm going to be able to share some information with you here shortly. What I passed out is just our agenda for this afternoon, and so that you have an idea and a focus of where we're going and what our desired outcomes are. So if you look at that sheet that has our agenda, our desired outcome is to deepen understanding around the Chief of Staff Division impact on student outcome, and really to acquire and explore different tools and resources related to the work of the identified departments within the Chief of Staff Division. And so I'm going to do a brief opening. After I do an opening, you will see the various departments that will be able to engage in discussion. We had it planned for us to go into rotations. There's only 4. And being that there's only 4, and I believe there's another board member that will be coming, if that's the case, we can shift and make sure that everybody can come in here and do the presentations, and then instead of doing a round robin, whatever your choice.
That works. Thank you.
So as we get ready to get started here, there's several things that we really wanted to talk about. Today's focus is about innovation, impact on student achievement, and connections to our strategic plan. Each of the departments up under the Chief of Staff, that's the information that we're really going to focus on. Instead of going a mile wide and an inch deep, we're going to go an inch wide and a mile deep. And so when you have the opportunity to listen to the various departments within this division, you'll be able to ask clarifying questions to deepen your understanding. So here, when we look at the Chief of Staff Division, we have strategic planning and innovation, we have policy and security, which we know that we have board committees for those 2 departments as well. We have the Office of Professional Learning, Data Research and Accountability, Grants, and Equity Affairs. And so one of the things that I really wanted to share and just highlight is where are we with the strategic plan and what are we doing at this particular point? And so these are our 3 priorities that we have listed. And up under those priorities, you will see the aims. Those aims that you see are the aims that we are focusing on for this school year and as we begin to engage in that work. If you look under operational effectiveness, equity framework, recruitment and retention, metrics of accountability, safety upgrades, and transportation. And so I wanted to share that with you so that you have an idea, because we did extensive work in building the strategic plan to include the aims. But now you're going to be able to see how these aims are coming into play, what are we focusing on, and how it's going to guide our work moving forward. Unfortunately, we don't have the time right now to dive deeply into each of those, but if you have any clarifying questions, by all means, please reach out, and I'll be more than happy to share more detailed information. So innovative initiatives that we have within our district. We have many, but I put a few up here on the board that are particularly tied to our department and the work that we're doing within the Chief of Staff Division. And so as you look up there, one, I ask you, are you aware of any of them? Have you seen any of them that resonate with you that you've seen before, or is this the first time that you've really seen them?
Not all of them, definitely.
Seen a couple.
Just probably a couple.
Is there one in particular that you would like for me to go more in depth with?
Cheryl looks like you have.
I have not heard about the Spark NC Learning Labs.
That's the same one that I had picked.
All right, so let me give you a little bit about the Spark NC Learning Lab. We have partnered with Wake Technical Community College and Spark NC to create a Wake County Public School System Spark NC Learning Lab on the Mooresville campus, and that's we're trying to open that as soon as possible. The estimated timeline we were shooting for today in order to open that, but it's going to be pushed back because we have to create an MOU, share additional information, and talk about and discuss what that's going to look like. The staffing for that particular position will be a Learning Lab leader. Spark NC is funding that position. And so the Spark NC Learning Lab offers exploratory learning experiences along pathways to careers in high-tech fields like artificial intelligence, machine learning, software development, computer systems engineering, and cybersecurity. The Spark NC model intentionally seeks to break down barriers for students underrepresented in the tech space by offering a self-paced, self-directed learning opportunities to earn high school credit at no penalty. At Wake County, a Wake County student can enroll anywhere in Wake County, and Learning Lab is there for their interaction with peers from around the county and direct support from Spark Lab leaders, and to access high-powered computer software and technology. So in essence, any student within Wake County can have access to these particular courses that are going to be online. But here's the caveat to that. So say, for instance, I enroll in the cybersecurity. I go into the cybersecurity, I start taking the modules and realize that's not something that I'm really interested in. I can back out of that at no penalty and go into another career pathway. And then if I finish, once upon finishing that career pathway, then I'll be able to receive high school credit for that particular course. So it's a great opportunity. It removes barriers. And the great thing about it is it eliminates all barriers to access. Any student can access it.
Very exciting initiative. Thank you. Do we have time for another?
Yes.
Mr. Hershey.
The AI core team.
Yes. So the AI core team, so what we've been putting together is a generative AI core team in which we're looking at how to empower students, teachers, and students, teachers, and the community at whole to use generative AI in a responsibly and innovative format. And so in my conversation with Dr. Taylor, I asked, hey, is this something that we want to do? We want to be at the forefront of this. We want to create guidelines. We're looking at how do we create policies, because this is the way of the future. It's here. It's not going anywhere. So how do we harness it and use it in a way that everybody understands how it can positively impact student learning and academic achievement? And so right now we're in partnership with an AI expert at this particular point, and I don't want to call out his name because we're still working on some fundamental concepts of how we can create a contract and partner in doing this work. But I'll give you an example. There is a district in Virginia that has already created guidelines, policies, how to utilize it with digital literacies, what is the impact. And we want our district to be in the forefront of this work as well and begin engaging in that process. So that's what the AI core team is about. I can take one more.
Mr. Swanson?
Let's go with the upcoming leadership summit.
I feel like a game show. Yes, we'll take the leadership summit.
500.
Absolutely. All right, so, you know, one of the things that we always talk about is how do we market ourselves? How do we market our district? How do we showcase the innovative and creative things that we're doing within our district? And so what we have is we're creating a Leadership Pathways to Excellence and Equity Summit, which is going to be held on February 28th through the 29th. Attendees will learn from the innovative pre-K, 12, and higher education leaders and engage with extraordinary educators, including our superintendent, Dr. Taylor, who will be facilitating that and leading that in the forefront. They will be able to visit our nationally ranked schools to learn about our dynamic instruction and comprehensive magnet, CTE, and Equity Fools programming. So that's going to be an opportunity where we're sending invitations out to everyone across the nation. We're asking them to come partner with us and learn about some of the great things that we're doing. And in those partnerships, we'll be able to learn some of the things that they're doing as well. So we're going to market ourselves. And we're going to say, we are Wake, and look at what we're doing.
excellent way to build that brand and achieve the things that Dr. Taylor talked about in terms of excellence across the nation. So thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you for allowing me to, I really want to engage more and really start hitting all of them, but there's so many other things that we want to share with you today. I want Kendrick to have an opportunity just to share a few words, and I want Julie to have the opportunity as well, as their departments and the work that they do are really tied to their committee work, but there are a lot of things that they're doing as well. And so please, sir, if you can just take a minute and say a few things.
So good afternoon, everyone. As you know, or may or may not know, we fall under priority number 3, operational effectiveness, and there's 2 aims I think I just want to bring to your attention quickly, and that's aim number 15 and 18. So prioritizing safety upgrades. As you know, a lot of the things that we do in the security department we can't discuss out in the open, but one of the things that we can discuss are things that we've already done that are already out there. So the biggest upgrade that we've done, is the VMS, Visitor Management System with Verkada. A huge department initiative, touched every school in the district. Improving safety plans, we have an EOP that is not the top secret thing that we go over that every year. It's annually updated. We're getting ready to do a massive upgrade to that document. Tharrington Smith currently has it in their possession. They're doing their final runs through of it. So that's going to probably go out, hoping once the school year closes to push that out. Next school year, so it'll be a fresh look at how we do all of our emergency operations plans. And then the other aim of recruiting and hiring and developing non-instructional staff, we are constantly working with our HR folks to try and make sure we are hiring the very best people that we can put in our schools to do the work that we do. So those are 2 things that I can't talk about in the open that I feel like I'd like to let you all know what we're doing in the Office of Security and the work that we do.
We appreciate your leadership.
Call me.
Dr. Crane? Yes, ma'am.
Ooh, green, I love it. So you're familiar with our work in the policy committee, and one of my primary jobs is managing our migration to the school board associations, migrating our policy manual from our old manual to our new manual. So we as you see, we are continually revising our policies, migrating policies so that we are in full alignment with the North Carolina School Board Association's model policy manual. Sometimes we have to do revisions based on recently passed legislation. Sometimes we're ushering through adoption of new policies because of the migration. So that's the main channel of my work, and then I support Leanne and our work in the strategic plan and other duties as assigned.
Many other duties.
What might those be?
Well, you are quite humble as you manage the complexities of all of the policies, so appreciate the way that you're able to manage some very complex work for the district. So thank you for your leadership.
So at this time, we're going to go ahead and transition to the Office of Professional Learning, and I will turn the table over to Ms. Ford, and she will be able to take you through her presentation and information.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Just pivot from in there to in here, right? I'm Mary Board. This is Erin Thaler. And we also have Wendy Clark, who's here from our department, too, that can answer questions for you at the end. First, we just wanted to start with a general overview of what our department does. We have a department of around 10 people, and we are in charge of a lot of courses in our department. The courses are for a variety of people: teachers, school leadership, central service staff, and support staff. We also help support and consult on design and delivery of professional learning. That's for other departments. And we do cognitive coaching work in our department as well. Our collaborative work, we do the professional learning days, and we help with logistics as well as actually present trainings on those days. We do a lot of onboarding work with new assistant principals or beginning teachers, and we collaborate with central service departments on professional learning. The last thing we do is we offer a lot of conferences during the year as well. And so the Summer Leadership Conference is probably our biggest, one of our biggest conferences. But we have IA, Instructional Assistant Empowerment Conference, Future Teachers, and a Clerical Institute that we do. We base a lot of our work on John Hattie's research. And his research talks about effect sizes of trying different things. And so some of the things that like I used to think was really important, we found out through his research, it's not as important as other things. So for example, I always used to hear, oh, we need to reduce class sizes, and you as board members have probably heard that too. But when you look at the effect size, that's not as big of an effect as some of the other things. So what we try and do is really focus on some of these things that have the biggest effect sizes. And one of those things is this collective teacher efficacy, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so there are two big parts of the strategic plan that we have in our department. One is to cultivate high-quality professional learning communities, and we'll let you know the work that we're doing around that one. And our other aim is to design and offer a comprehensive professional learning pathways for all staff. So we'll fill you in on the work on that. But I did want you to know when we're thinking about John Hattie's work and his research, we're trying to pick the things that are over here to focus on. And both of these aims focus on those areas. Okay, this is Erin's work for professional learning communities, so I'm going to let her tell you about those.
I'm so pleased to tell you about the work our PLC team does to support our almost 200 schools and all of their teachers. So we're focused on those collaborative teams. The professional learning communities is that collective teacher efficacy. So when we're talking about the highest yield strategy, that is our teachers sitting around a table, looking at data, unpacking standards, and being responsive to their students. What do they know? What do they need to know? So we have different levels of support. The one that is available to everybody is we've offered book studies in the past. We have support hours, so people will call and want to talk with us for an hour, and we'll talk them through. We'll be thought partners. We'll help them solve problems. We also offer courses, and then a lot of times we'll be asked to present for APs or principals for IFs. So we do lots of different professional learning day sessions, and we collaborate with other departments. But the work that is the most intensive and the most I am excited about is our pilot. So as part of our strategic plan, we have a 5-year plan where right now, this is our year 1, we're working with 6 elementary schools intensively to really roll out what PLCs, their best practice, and also removing barriers for teachers so they can really engage in the work and have it be meaningful. Year 2, next year, we're going to attempt to roll this out to all 120 schools. Year 3, we'll start a secondary pilot, so we'll redo that pilot experience, and then year 4 and 5 is where PLCs will be rolled out to all schools. And so our PLC pilot is all about making PLC meaningful, practical, and impactful for our teachers. So we work very closely with the principals, APs, and IFs to plan a month ahead. We also provide every other week we meet with our grade chairs and we support them in how to facilitate PLCs coming up. We have a dashboard that is like one-stop shopping of anything that they would need. We're bringing academic resources right to them, so that way right there they can unpack their standards. All the amazing work that academics has done, we're trying to feed right into their PLC process. We even have videos that coach the facilitators through. And we're going to school visits, and so that's the best work, because we get to see what is our work happening in action, and then how can we better support our schools. And that's our pilot.
Yeah, and I will say too with the pilot, some amazing things that they're doing, like they're creating rolling agendas, as you can see there, that have everything that a PLC would need in order to do, it's called an inquiry cycle, but like if they're doing database problem solving, here's your rolling agenda for that, here's your slides that would go with that, here are the resources that you need. So that way when we're ready to support all elementary schools next year, those resources will be all created. So the last thing I wanted to do is just talk about professional learning pathways, so you have a visual in your mind of what these look like. We are in early stages of working on professional learning pathways, and one reason is because when you think about a pathway, what we want to focus on is when you're new to teaching, you need different professional development than you do when you're an experienced teacher or when you're a teacher leader. So we want to build a comprehensive professional learning experience for our staff that meets their needs. This is an example of a teacher pathway, but it's just as powerful when you think of like an administrative pathway, a lead secretary pathway. Like right now, the professional developments, they're kind of, all those offerings are everywhere, and we want to do a much more streamlined process based on what they need. Now, the challenging part and why it's taking a while to start with is it's a very collaborative thing in nature. So the structure might be ours in the Office of Professional Learning, but what actually goes on these pathways, that comes from departments across Wake County. So we want to make sure that we're getting having the right conversations with people. Also, we need to be really clear about what these focus areas are for teachers and staff. So for example, if I'm a teacher and I'm struggling with positive relationships with my students, I could plug into this area and know that this professional development is what I would want to focus on first. And we're working with Stacy's department right now because Dr. Wilson Norman is working to really define what these focus areas are as well. And so that's why it's taking a while, because we need that alignment in our district. Because everything is going to be built off of these focus areas. Okay? Any questions on any of that?
Any questions? I think you've given us a lot of great information. I do have a question. So the PLC, is it always the educators within the building as part of the PLC? And I asked, I'm thinking about some educators who may not be large in the numbers of a school, like an AU pre-K teacher. So would they have the opportunity to participate with other educators and be able to build skills and build connectivity with educators outside of their building?
Yes, that's a great question. And yes, there are virtual PLCs as well. Even my art teacher once a month would go to a PLC in a different place. So for those people that have the single areas in a building, you're right, it's so important for them to have connections with people that teach those same things.
And then one other question. So in terms of the training, is there a portal that you're able to log in to see what's available? How does one find out about the available courses that they might be able to access?
Yeah, so we have a portal right now. It's called Wake Learns. And like as a principal last year, I could go in Wake Learns and I could click on, I want to see all the leadership courses that are being offered. And it will list all those courses. What the portal doesn't do, and what a pathway will do when we get it developed, is if I'm at, the portal will just say, here's all the leadership courses, Mary, that you might need. But this would say, okay, but if you're an experienced principal, this is what you need, as opposed to a beginning principal might need this, or an assistant principal might need this.
Well, I appreciate this information, Mr. Hershey.
How do you keep track of who takes what?
Wake Learns does that for us.
Okay.
And we have a lot, and I should say too, Wake Learns, a great thing about that portal is it actually keeps track of the credits that people take, and that it talks then to our licensing system, so those all track their professional learning to help them get their next license.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I know educators are always looking for opportunities to continue to build skills, and so you're playing a critical role in the success of educators across the district, so really appreciate getting this overview.
I do have one question, and thank you both for this information. It's quite a bit. I do wish that when I was in the classroom, this would have been a great, helpful tool, especially I feel in that new teaching category as a lateral entry, so I was definitely involved in taking as many of those professional learning as I could when I was at Menlo. But my question is, has teachers been able to give you all some of the input of what they would like to see, and as you're going through this pathway?
Yes, we have a team that we work with, and it has like instructional facilitators on it, and special education reps, and teachers, and so it's just like this real cross team of people. We also, as soon as we get this piece done with AAT, we want to then take this to STAC and some of our teacher groups as well, beginning teacher groups even, so that we can make sure that when we're ready to put stuff in here, we're putting the right things, because we don't want it to be what does the district think they need. We want it to be a combination of, okay, the district says this, but the teachers also say this, and we want to make that really practical for them.
And for the new teaching, is there some connections or partnership with the CCTI, Carolina Teaching Initiative? As they're training new teachers, is there a way for there to be some direct connection for them to kind of feed those teachers into the pipeline as they're going through and getting their license?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I don't know if we have thought of that connection, but we will definitely make a note of that. Thank you.
Well, we certainly thank you for this presentation.
Okay. And I'll turn it over to Brad McMillan.
Thank you, Mary. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Julie, unfortunately, is out at a school doing some work with one of our middle schools right now, so she couldn't get here in time, and so she's probably watching from there. But I'm here today, hopefully, to walk through some of this. The first couple of slides are just basic information about our department, what we do and how we do it. This is similar to the information we shared during board orientation, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's probably stuff you already knew about us. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. And I'm going to go back to those banners that Dr. Robinson had up first, where he talked about innovation and student achievement and the strategic plan. And just talk about some very specific examples of ways in which our department tries to contribute to sort of those three categories of work around here. And in terms of innovation, I think one of the ways we do that is through the professional learning opportunities that we provide to educators, whether it's our central office colleagues or whether it's folks in schools. Everything from really specific videos on our YouTube channel to show our teachers how to log into systems and pull data about their students so that they can examine their students' academic performance, all the way to modules that we have in Canvas that help people navigate at their own pace, on their own time, and their own schedule to learn about things like data literacy and all the things that we train folks about. We also have a set of micro-credential offerings that we've created over the last couple of years that allow teachers or administrators to go through kind of a set, what we call a stack of learning opportunities that has sort of a performance task they have to complete at the end in order to sort of get, it's almost like acquiring a certificate of sorts. They get CEUs for it, but unlike a lot of professional learning where you just go through it and you get the CEUs for just going through it, for these micro-credentials that we've created, you actually have to demonstrate competency at the end, and then you sort of get the credential for that. So it's like earning a certificate, or like a lot of our high school kids do in CTE and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit of a different concept. But we got a grant from an organization called Next Generation Learning a few years ago to help create some of these and push them out. And so we've had the opportunity to sort of help cohorts of teachers and administrators move through that to earn those, so that when they go to maybe get their next job, it's something they can point to say, hey, here's a skill that I have that maybe not everybody who's applying for this job has. I know a lot about this stuff and I can prove it. That's also then dovetailed into, once we got that one stood up during the pandemic, we actually worked with our colleagues in Student Support Services and the Office of Professional Learning to set up a similar micro-credential stack for our instructional assistants. We learned that that was a group of people that didn't have a ton of professional learning focus in our district. We do a lot of stuff for teachers and admins, but IAs are often, they don't have as much to choose from. And so we worked with them to create a micro-credential cohort where a bunch of IAs went through some learning stacks around behavioral health and social emotional learning, which was built off the same model that we use the grant funds to create the data literacy credentials from. And then the last one I'll point out to is the upper right there are the podcasts that our staff has set up over the last couple of years. Our Data Lit podcast is going into its 4th season. It's basically focused on, it's called a podcast for educators by educators. It's in the Apple Store, it's on Spotify. If you Google it, you can find it. And basically what we've done with that is through the 4 seasons we've done, we've pulled in teachers of the year, we've pulled in principals, having them talking about how they use and make use of data in their schools and assessment in their schools. We've had guest speakers who are national experts on things like grading and rubrics and classroom assessment, and gone through kind of like an interview type format with them. And then we've also gone to some of our departments here centrally who use data and kind of highlighted how do these departments use data in their job. We had Kendrick do an episode for us, I think, a few months ago, and our most recent one out there is from our Office of Student Assignment, and they're talking about how they use all of the geospatial data that they have in terms of looking at where families are moving in, where housing starts are, and how that relates to how we know the student achievement shifts are going to be coming 3 to 4 years down the road, so that we can be really mindful of those kinds of things. So it's just a lot of topics around data and assessment literacy, but a lot of it is really focused on classroom educators and things that they can use around classroom assessment and building better classroom assessments and working with data in their classrooms. One of the other things that we try to do around innovation has to do with our program evaluation work. Most of this work falls under Policy 3140, which is our evaluation of instructional programs policy. And that first pink bucket up there is the high-level work that is based on what we report to the board annually around the larger studies that we do. So for example, the one we just finished about the 3-year AIG plan that we sent out about a month ago would be an example of something that falls into that pink category up there. But one of the other things that we do at a different level that maybe y'all are not as well aware of is what we call self-monitoring. We engage in our program evaluation office in about 3 to 5 like kind of large studies at any given point, where we're looking at big initiatives that take multiple years to roll out to see whether they're having the impact that we want them to have on student achievement. But in addition to that, program evaluation staff also work with central office departments on about anywhere from 2 to as close to 3 dozen other projects during the year, where we're not the ones evaluating the impact of a particular initiative, but we're helping the business owners or the program managers of those learn how to do that themselves. And what that results in is an annual report that gets fed up to leadership. And when budget decisions are being made in the following year, all that information is shared with leadership, so that if we have an initiative around new science kits or a mentoring program for beginning teachers, we have data that leadership can evaluate to say, how well did this go last year? Did it get implemented well? Is it going on the right trajectory? Should we continue it? Do we need to kind of take a different tack? Or is it something that's just not working and we need to repurpose that effort somewhere else? So because we know we can't evaluate all of the, quote, instructional programs in the district, what we do in the self-monitoring lane here is basically to try and teach our colleagues how to do that for themselves, so that we can touch many more things than if we were only evaluating them ourselves just from our department. And so that's something a lot of districts I don't think have done as much of a good job of doing of our size, sort of our peer districts, and that's something that we think is pretty innovative. And then the last thing I'll point out is the ways in which we've sought over the last several years to partner with external researchers and organizations as another way to sort of extend our reach and do more work. In the way that the self-monitoring allows us to collect more data on more programs by basically delegating a lot of that work to our central office colleagues and helping them sort of learn to do that themselves. We've also partnered with a lot of outside organizations to study other things that we don't have the capacity to study that we know are of importance to the district. So for example, school start times and student outcomes, the question about high school starting early is something that surfaces a lot for us. We were able to work with some researchers at NC State to look at the impact of when about 5 or 6 of our high schools had a significant shift in their bell schedule several years back, about how that did or did not affect student outcomes. We were able to look at some long-term outcomes of our magnet programs with some external researchers under, not I think the last magnet grant, but maybe the magnet grant 2 grants ago, where we were able to follow kids who took that magnet school pathway experience in elementary and middle school and compared to comparable students, what did their outcomes look like at high school? And we're able to learn things like their attendance rates and their ACT scores were higher than comparable students who did not go through our magnet program. Because we're always concerned about, we know they have great experiences while they're there, but what's the long-term benefit to students of participating in magnet? And then the other one I'll pick on here is the impacts of career academies. We did a study with some researchers from UNC Chapel Hill a few years back of our IT academy at Apex High School, our ALIT career academy, and we're able to document that those students who went through that were more likely to graduate on time and more likely to attend college than students who didn't. So in terms of being able to just get more work done with more folks, we've worked really hard and intentionally to partner with outside organizations and researchers to help us kind of get a lot of this work done, because we have tons of data, we're doing tons of things in the district, but we can't necessarily learn at that depth about all of them. And so we try and marshal that support where we can, because folks who work in that field, they have graduate students who need to do dissertations, they have papers they need to publish so they can get tenure. So they're sort of incentivized to work with us on some of these things because the work benefits them. Even if we can't pay them, they can still partner with us on things that are of common interest and things that we really need to learn about. The second banner, student achievement, the obvious way that we connect to that is we're the ones who measure it. And these are all of the ways and all of the places where we measure it. So our testing office handles most of the machinery of that. So that's the way that we connect to that in the most direct way. But we don't just simply kind of, call the race, if you will. We work with a lot of our other colleagues with those data in other areas as well. Not just our folks in schools, but our folks in other central office departments to help them unpack it, to help them understand it, to help them aggregate and disaggregate it in the way that makes sense to them. We work with our Office of Equity Affairs folks because we know that they have an intense need to access our data to be able to monitor what equity looks like in our district and how our underserved populations are improving or not improving, or having opportunities or not having opportunities. We work with our area superintendents and their assistants because the school improvement planning process falls under them. And obviously that is a very data-driven process that relies on a lot of our data. Individual schools and principals. And also we work with our friends in student information systems to make sure that the data that we collect from the testing and accountability program gets fed into all of our systems so that it can get pushed out on all the different platforms we have, so teachers can see the scores for their students, so principals can see the scores for their schools, and making sure that all those systems are running quickly and efficiently so that it can get where it needs to get as quickly as it needs to get there. And then lastly, our connections to the strategic plan. Obviously, in terms of goals 1, 2, and 3, our department's responsible for publishing all of the data that measures those things and letting people know what it means and helping make sure everybody understands what it is they're looking at when those results come out. And then within the work of the plan, priority 1, aim 3 says analyze performance data to guide core instruction planning and high impact interventions. Well, obviously, our data that we collect in our department feeds into all of that process and is sort of the stepping off place for all of that work. And then we also coordinate the reporting of all of the other goals and metrics that are part of the plan, which we shared at, I think, a meeting about a month or so ago, including all of those smaller metrics, so sort of sub-goals, if you will, that fall under our 3 priority areas. And then in an indirect way, we monitor and report on effectiveness of everything that we can through our program evaluation process, helping other departments collect and gather and analyze the data that they have that helps them operate effectively and efficiently. And just serve as a general support and a resource to folks around that work as much as we possibly can. So that's the end of our work, and I'll be able to take any questions you all may have about anything I shared or didn't.
Mr. Hershey?
The external researchers and organizations that you guys use, do you share that with the board?
We do quite often. It depends on the topic of the study. Most of them get published on our website. So they're there for public consumption, but as far as notifying the board when those come out, it depends on whether or not leadership feels like it's something that's of like real strategic importance. So for example, the school start time study, that was something the board directly asked us about. We were able to share that directly. The magnet study, because of the import of the magnet program to everything we do around here, we did. I can't say for sure that we've directly sent all of them to the board, but I would say probably 70 to 80% of them have been communicated to the board over time.
And you may have done this, so I apologize if I missed it, but can you send the school start time and student outcomes?
Absolutely, happy to do that. Yeah.
And
we can send you kind of a list of over the past.
that would
5
be
years.
fantastic.
Yeah, here's
Yeah.
the work that's kind of fallen under this umbrella.
I appreciate that. Is your department then in charge of the database for the whole county? You referenced what teachers can pull up
Yeah.
to check on a student. I didn't know if that was you or if that's really technology. And
Not really. The Technology Services owns the machinery, right?
Okay.
But we provide some of the data. They oversee our student information system. So
Got it.
That's like 90% of it, but then all of the testing and accountability, the data we have has to be married with that. So that way, when you're teaching 4th grade at Cedar Fork Elementary and you go into the database, it knows who your kids are and it knows what their scores are. So it's kind of a joint thing where they kind of own the machine, but we help them design the interfaces, design the kinds of reports that we think principals and teachers need to see, and then they create them.
So do you get feedback from departments on what they're looking for?
Oh, all the time, absolutely. Yeah, we do. And is constantly changing, needs are constantly changing. What we find is when we design reports for folks around one thing, it generally leads them to want something else because
Sure.
it's like, oh, that's really cool, and now could I see it this way? So it's just a constant iterative process.
Do you feel that we have upgrades to do in the database to make it more accessible across all departments, and that there's training that needed?
I think yes to both of those things. I think we've done a really good job of using fairly antiquated systems to get stuff to people really quickly, but some of the tools that we're working with are probably about 20 years old, if I had to be honest with you, and probably not at the level where they would need to be for an organization as large as we are. Our friends in tech services do a great job of kind of papering over some of that,
Yeah.
kind of putting the duct tape on and making it run. But I've been in some conversations recently with our new CTO, who's come in and kind of with a different eye on things.
Right.
I think he's been a little bit surprised about the opportunities that might be there that we haven't taken in the past that we
Yes.
really need to. Because, if data gets to a teacher and it's 3 weeks too late, it may as well not get there at all.
Do you have a specific ask you would want as part of like the budget or something the board can get behind in this regard?
I think probably as we get into the budget cycle, that's something that Sashi and I have talked about on more than one occasion, and I think that's probably something we'd like to pursue in the future, of course, given all of the other needs that the district has. But yeah, I think it's something that really, from my perspective at least, warrants a little bit of an upgrade. It's coming.
Okay, well, I was gonna say, I love all the innovative stuff, and I want to make sure that the engine is running, is fully up to date
Yeah.
as we're doing all these other innovative aspects.
I 110% agree with you.
All right, fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You said that this is on our website, all of the data that you go through. Where is that on our website?
I can send you a link. If you go to the About Us link on our website and click on Student Outcomes, we archive all of our public reports there, at least going back to, probably even the early 2000s. There's quite an archive of them there. But I can send you the direct link that takes you there. It's about 3 or 4 clicks from the homepage.
And that'll have what you were speaking about with him? It'll
Should have everything that we do.
Your
Yeah.
studies, okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just have a couple. On the previous slide, there was a bullet point about the assistant principal role, diversifying the leadership pipeline.
Yeah.
Could you speak to that a little bit? I was just
Yeah,
kind of curious, because I'm
absolutely.
always interested in like succession planning and what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, over the last couple of years, this is one where we don't necessarily have like a product, like a report yet. We're like about this close within the next few months of having something. But one of the folks, analysts in our department, has been working with human resources, looking at over like the last 2 decades or so, how teachers move to APs and how APs become principals. Being able to look at things like how many years does it take, how many AP jobs does a teacher have to apply to before they finally get one, how many principal jobs does an AP apply to before they get one, and the different factors that sort of come into play there. Like, do our male and female administrators move through that pipeline at the same rate, for example? Do our administrators of color move that pipeline through the same rate as our white administrators, historically speaking? And what are the factors that cause an AP to say choose to become a principal at this school versus that school, in terms of the characteristics of the school and that sort of thing? And just looking at how people move through that sort of career pipeline. We know how many APs we have, we know how many teachers we have, but we've never really looked at what that trajectory looks like, because if we're interested in things like diversifying our pipeline, we need to know how people are moving through it now, what kinds of barriers might already exist that we can eliminate. Or maybe some ways where we need to push in, and where's the point in that pipeline where we need to intervene if we want to have more diversity? Do we have to have a more diverse teacher pool, or is there a way to do it at the AT level, or is it a combination of both? I'm just trying to suss out some of those things.
Well, I appreciate that work is being done, so, yeah, appreciate that. Any other questions? Well, we certainly appreciate the data that is available to us as we make data-informed decisions, so thank you for your work. And it's good to see Ms. DeFore. As a small personal note, my professional career started in the grants office, so glad to have you here.
So you have great knowledge of this already.
I believe that.
So real quickly, we presented to you in April, so we went over some of this at that time, but Our grants department has 4 people in it. We're small but mighty, we like to say. Our main role is to research grant funding opportunities and communicate them to staff and let them know about what's available. We often have long conversations about whether or not a grant's a fit for us and whether or not we should move forward with an application. If we do move forward with applications, staff help develop that because I am not a content expert on all of this, but we depend on those who are content experts to help us put together our grants. But we do assist with the process of submitting things and helping with writing grants, especially the district-wide grants. We conduct grants training for our school staff, and then once grants are awarded, we monitor grant programs and make sure we're in compliance with regulations. We don't want to be in trouble with anybody. So, this slide shows you highlights from our 22-23 year. I think we had a really great year in 22-23. We received almost $33 million in grants that were applied for during that calendar year. I've listed them by size here. The Magnet grant you're aware of, Dr. Lane is here right now. She presented to you several times about that grant. It is a whole school, all the schools involved in that are whole school magnets. The purpose of those grants are to prevent minority group isolation, increase student achievement, and offer a high-quality educational choice to our students. A second large federal grant that we received is the Teacher and School Leadership Innovation Grant. Brad had it on his slide. This grant has 2 main focus points. One is to enhance our human capital management system. The other is to implement performance-based compensation systems to recruit, retain, reward high-performing educators, and it is going to focus on 24 high-need schools. A third large one, and we're going to talk about these 3 top ones in just a minute, a little more detail. We also received a state grant, the Advanced Teaching Roles Grant. We are working in partnership with Public Impact and with the Innovation Project on this grant, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. In addition, we received a school safety grant. You all heard a lot about the visitor management system that was implemented at the end of last school year. That came through the Department of Public Instruction. We got a grant for local food for schools. That was through the Department of Agriculture. And then I put Wake Up and Read because it's my heartfelt favorite. I love literacy and I work a lot with Wake Up and Read. That's $50,000 grant was from the Triangle Community Foundation, the Tom and Pat Gibson Fund, and it supported outreach to families and additional supports to get the word out about the resources available for Wake Up and Read. So I'll just do a little bit more detail about the 3 top grants. We already mentioned the Magnet Grant Program. The Eastern area was the focus of this grant, and some of these schools were already magnets and they were significantly revised, and some of them were newly formed magnets. And this grant was just awarded in September, so they are in the process of getting things up and running with this. Dr. Lane, anything you want to add about woohoo? Right. The U.S. Department of Education Teacher and School Leader Incentive Program. This is a grant that we had tried for previously a couple years ago and did not receive, so we were really excited when we got this one. It will provide $13.5 million over 3 years for us to work on our human capital management system, particularly the recruitment. It will allow us, currently Jason Kennedy is a recruitment department of 1. He will get 2 people to help him, which will be great. You talked about scale not changing as the district grew. I think that is a classic example. Also, it will allow us to support our teachers with professional development, and then and opportunities like with if they want to get their master's in school administration or continue their PhDs. It will help also like with board certification, and then we'll in the 24 high need schools we'll be supporting teacher excellence in those schools. The Advanced Teaching Roles Grant is one that we served as the fiscal sponsor for Public Impact and the Innovation Project. We are a participant in the grant. There are actually currently 4. We're going to be 6, but we're down to 4 right now, but they may grow again. districts involved in this project. It involves using opportunity culture to to develop advanced roles for teachers so that they will be able to continue to work in their building with additional, kind of grow their career path with additional stipends and responsibilities. And it redesigns their jobs and so forth. We're just getting this one underway. And we're excited about the possibilities. We will be introducing this as a pilot program in 6 of our schools to be determined which schools this will be. And then I just wanted to mention, I showed the numbers for everything, but I have to mention that the grants written by teachers total up to a lot for our district. And their passion, and they know what their students need, and they're asking for grants for their students all the time. I went and looked in preliminary, we don't have everything in yet, and it's all kind of preliminary, but in 22-23, our teachers wrote over $300,000 worth of grants. That's a lot of grants, especially when you consider that a lot of them are $500 or $1,000. And I just wanted you to see the kinds of things they're asking for. And in our district, approximately, and it's all general, but approximately 30% of what they ask for are books or things, to their educational games and kits that their students can use, resources that they can use in their classrooms to help their students, to tailor their education. So I just shout out to our teachers who are amazing. We had 144 of our 198 schools submit grants last year. There were 720 grants submitted by educators in those schools. And I'm just really proud of what they do. And we're trying to grow that and support the teachers as they move forward. So how do we fit to the strategic plan? We cover the gamut. So when you look at our items, our backup on the PRACE, we try to put a check mark where we see the alignment for each grant opportunity. Because we do look at that every time to see, is this grant aligned with our strategic plan? And so I just put them all up there because we cover the gamut. So that's it for me. Any questions?
You can look at everyone else.
Well, you had your hand up first, so.
You mentioned 144 schools this year. What was the number last year?
Well, that was 22,
I mean,
23,
the
yeah.
prior. Any,
I am not sure, but I would think it's about the same. It was down some during COVID, so I do know that number.
Can we check to see if any schools are routinely not asking
Yes.
and inquiring?
As a
and
matter of
providing?
fact, we just did an inventory of 22, 23 to try to figure out, is there like a commonality among the ones that don't apply?
Right.
And we looked at like Title I, Restart, and I can share that information with you. I'm not seeing a pattern. Because a lot of our Title I and Restart schools are very active grant writers. And so it's not, I need other people to look at the data and help me see if they see patterns. But at any rate, the ones that aren't writing grants are ones that we want to reach out to and offer more support.
And I was looking at it more of if they haven't written a grant asked for a grant for over 5 years, not necessarily.
Oh, that's a good point. I haven't gone back
Because
that far. Yeah.
then you can identify schools that maybe, whatever the case is, why they're not, but that would be, that's where I would look first.
That's a great point. We could look at trends.
Right.
Any other questions?
So, Ms. Caulfield?
If you could just go back to page, slide 30. And this is just more for me to understand a little bit.
I don't know which one's 30.
The USED magnet schools
Yeah,
assistance.
okay.
That one?
That one. I'm wondering, because those are all schools in my district right
Yeah.
there. So I'm wondering, how does that come about? Because, I mean, you're talking about with the strategic plan and also the data and all the information that we come about, and that's a very concentrated area. So why are they all on the list? Like, how did it come about? Just so I can understand more.
I think, you want me to do it? I want you to do it because you know it cold.
So we have never written a grant, a magnet grant before that was geographically similar. This was the first.
Yeah.
The previous grant is called MSAP Synergy, and that was East Millbrook, Wildwood Forest, Wake Forest Elementary, and Centennial. When we started that grant process, we have a process of looking at the data from our data folks, data research and accountability, student assignment. SIS is certainly involved in that, and really looking at, across the board, at minority group isolation, because this is the one federal grant that we can look at race. So we look for minority group isolation, we look at free and reduced lunch, we are now using economic growth index. So there are multiple data points, student performance, and then we're looking at how that ranges with the district average. So we are always looking for schools that are about 15-20% above the district average. So every year we go through this process, and because these have been, typically it's an every 5-year process, but because we had 3 kind of in a row, we had ongoing data of schools that qualified in that group. We started looking at Eastern Wake during that Synergy grant cycle, so that was 2022. At the time, we did not have the charter school data that we were able to obtain after that to see how many students we were losing, particularly in the Eastern Wake area. We also had a tremendous amount of growth in the year and a half when we started writing the grant in 2022, because we started about 18 months ahead of time. So we had a tremendous amount of growth, and we were able to geo-map that and project 10 years out. And that's the only area that has such great growth in Wake County right now, that we were able to project the number of students that might be in that area, that we wanted to find a way as a district hall. And if you remember, we talked to Superintendent Moore, talked to the board about providing some local funding for our Eastern Wake schools to support. We had talked about some of the facility issues in that particular area. So this was always on our radar, and then when we came back and had another opportunity for a grant cycle, going through that data again, Zebulon Elementary, Middle, and Wendell Middle were already magnet schools. So we were trying also not to put a heavy lift on our transportation department. So we started thinking about where might we revision magnet programs that could help bring in market share, bring our students back, our base students, that wouldn't be pulling from across the district, so it's not such a heavy burden on transportation, because we understood that was an issue too. So just all the factors led us to Eastern Wake. East Wake High School was looking for ways to revamp. At the same time, Wake Tech was building their East Wake campus. And it became, we've been trying to stress our K-12 magnet pathways, so it became an opportunity to really tap into what resources that Wake Tech was going to offer. So part of what they're offering that's unique in their East Wake campus is they're going to have a partnership with Elizabeth State University and with ECU, where students can complete their 4-year university degrees at the Wake Tech campus. So just the resources that this opened up for Eastern Wake just led us down this path. Again, we've never done one in one single geography. But it just made a lot of sense with all of the contributing factors. Hope that helps.
Yes, thank you very much.
Appreciate the investment in the eastern part of our county, as we see tremendous growth there. There is good need.
And need.
Yes.
Thank you.
May I ask one quick question? So for an educator who has no grant writing experience, but who is interested in funding a project, what does it look like getting some support to be able to start that process for the first time?
So we have office hours twice a month that they can, at a set time, they can just log on to Google, and we're happy to support them. They can call us on the phone anytime. We have great resources on Wake Connect, and also in our Learning Central. There's a whole grants course with lots of resources and ideas and what the process is, but also how to think about a grant, how to put one together.
Thank you. And as you said, your team is small but quite mighty, as the data has shown, so thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. We are members of the Office of Faculty Affairs. Today I get to introduce to many of you or announce two of my colleagues, Dr. Janine Perry Kimball, who is the Director of Student and Educator Engagement, and Chauncey Hatcher, Senior Administrator with the same title. We're excited to be in front of you today. I want to first acknowledge that this is the first day of American Indian Heritage Month. And I want to acknowledge that we are sitting or standing on ground that was once occupied or inhabited by our Native friends, brothers, and sisters. I wanted to acknowledge that. I think we have a plan for an acknowledgement ceremony or program, I should say, coming up. So today, you heard from me about 3 weeks ago. We had talked about the alignment of the strat plan, the equity-focused practices, to all of the work that we have been engaged upon in the last year or so. So a roadmap to what we're going to talk about today is just our initiatives. You'll hear about 2 of those initiatives today, aimed at student achievement and student learning and programming, and the impact of the equity policy to those programs and some of our future work related to equity initiatives. Our framework, again, our work is all inclusive of the strategic plan. When we think about excellence and equity, there is explicit connections to the work between the equity office and that of our strategic plan. We have one of the 4 essential pillars of the plan that is what you'll see how we operationalize the equity framework here on the board. It's also in concert to our equity policy that was a year from, 15 days from now, a year ago, is when the policy was adopted by the Board of Education. So we're excited that there's been some work that has happened since that adoption of the policy. On the left-hand side, you'll see our 10 equity-focused practices, in which we have unpacked with members of our board, that I'll highlight what those practices will be for this presentation, and on the right-hand side, our equity roadmap, the what and the how in order to achieve and work towards progress in equitable outcomes for our students. Thinking about this notion that equity is both an action and an outcome. So for this presentation, for just a few minutes, we're going to talk about, again, 2 programs. We'll highlight emphasis and put emphasis on one of the practices of disrupting disproportionality and what that means and how that shows up in our data, but specifically for student groups, marginalized groups, communities, and schools to realize our goals towards excellence and equity. We'll hit on, again, mobilizing data, how we take this data and start to think about our strategic roadmap through the lens of equity and how we redesign and transform outcomes for improved outcomes for all of our groups of students. The notion of centering student voice and how critical and how essential that is when we talk about student achievement and outcomes and improving outcomes for our students, particularly with instructional practices, behavioral interventions, processes, policies, decision-making support systems as well. And finally, how might we create and extend this work of creating brave spaces and belonging to all of our students, but particularly our students that don't feel like they are seen and heard and valued in the classroom experience and spaces. I want to highlight for a moment, instead of us going through each of the work streams here for the Office of Equity Affairs, I have petitioned and asked through the Chief of Staff's office for us to dive deeper into these work streams, because I do think that as we think about excellence and equity this year, we need more than 12 minutes to really talk about all of these particular buckets of work and how that impacts and integrates into the entire organization. And you might have heard throughout today's presentations how things are already connected to the work of equity and how we are collaborating with other entities throughout the district. So we have petitioned to be at work sessions to unpack and go deeper, much deeper, so that you get an understanding through Policy 1150 how our work impacts other parts of our organization. But today I'm excited to present you with these 2 buckets here, student engagement and educator engagement, through the work that both Dr. Perry Campbell and Mr. Hatcher have engaged upon in 2 examples and in 2 practices and examples and programs that we have in place. So you'll be hearing from us more throughout the course of this academic year. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Perry Campbell.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Janine, and I work, as Dr. Chavis said, in OEA, and I support students and educators. So in my role, and Chauncey, we're a dynamic duo, we're Wonder Twins. We go out into schools and we do professional learning experiences. More than just development, we create experiences that are hands-on, and we model best instructional practices for educators and how it directly impacts students. This is just a quick overview of some of the things that we do, and it may be difficult to see on Chauncey's laptop, but we just wanted to give you like just a little overview of sessions that we're currently doing in our schools. So the first one that we do is called Let's Talk Equity. We were at Conn Magnet Elementary School today, and we had about 2 hours to talk about equity. What it is, what does it mean, and we ensure that we align everything that we do to not only our strategic plan, our equity framework, our equity-focused practices, as well as the policy and how Wake County Public Schools defines equity. We are very strategic in doing this work because every school has its own session. So we ground best practices directly to their school improvement plans, because as we know, you can't teach students in a one-size-fit-all model. We can't develop schools in a one-size-fit-all as well. And so we go in and we delve into their school improvement plans, and we allow their indicators and their values to our values in Wake County Public Schools, so we can get educators and administrators to see the need for alignment. And so when we do that first session, we look at what is diversity. We do discuss it and ground it in race, but we want educators to know diversity is so much more than race. It's what we eat, it's where we live, it's our geographic locations. We always joke and tease, we're Southerners. It is a sin to put sugar in your grits. That's culture. And we break that down with diversity, right? And so some of those things are what we do when we look at how we're diverse and how it impacts what we do as educators. The handout that we gave you, just to show you, we give teachers practical and applicable applications that they can take the day we leave, right? Because we don't want sessions to be one and done, check in the box, we did it. We want you to employ these methods because they are research-based. They're grounded in the work of Hattie that you mentioned. They're grounded in the work of Zaretta Hammonds, Latson Billings, and other pioneers in this work. And so we won't read these to you, but these are some practical, applicable strategies that we give teachers. We go back and monitor, we observe them, and then we coach them to get the gains and the outcomes that we desire through equitable actions. Some other sessions, we do an implicit bias training, and it's called When They See Us. If you saw that network documentary, it kind of plays on that. But we give a historic aspect of implicit bias. We want educators to know it's more than just everyone has it, but we truly need to understand why we have them. And we do all have them, but once we understand the groundwork as to why we have them, now we can work towards eradicating them and being more intentional in disrupting those practices. We go into culturally responsive teaching practices, and one thing that we've done, I was an elementary school principal and an administrator as well as a teacher, and I always felt oftentimes as a teacher, we're always told what we're not doing, what we can't do. And so Chauncey and I are very strategic and strength-based approaches. And so we communicate with principals, and we literally record best practices that are occurring in each school that we support. And we show staff members great practices that they are doing. We want them to know this work is not another thing. It isn't something extra to do. It is just good teaching, and it's good practicing that helps everyone. And so today we showed a 2-minute clip of a colleague at Conn, and well, not at Conn, this was at another school when we did Culture Responsive, but the teachers actually used a tool that we created to show equitable practices that their colleague was doing. Not only did they get to see the positive outcomes directly of the students, they saw their teachers practicing it as well as the resources afforded to them. We have another session called, woo, these kids are out of control. Because we hear that a lot when we're coaching teachers about classroom management. And so now we show them how we went from being culturally competent, we're understanding implicit bias, we see the need to be culturally responsive in your pedagogical practices, and how that in fact comes into play with classroom management. We've created observation tools. We've had help from people in academics and other facets and central services to make sure that we're using things through varied lenses. We have conversations about data dialogues. How are we looking at them through equitable lenses? It's more than just who's proficient, but who isn't proficient and why aren't they proficient? And what outcomes do we hope to get, and what are the actions we should do to help eradicate those deficits and gaps? And then finally, we've done all of these things, now what? So how can we take tools, tips, and techniques to create repositories at school levels? So now, when you need resources, how can I be more culturally responsive in classroom management? How can I overcome some biases that I may have? You have a toolkit at your school specific to the demographics of your school, the needs of your schools, and you can go into that. They're teacher created. We vet them. As we get more and more, we'll work with academics to make sure that we're aligned to the goals from different offices so teachers can have resources that they need as well. So that's just a quick overview of some of the learning experiences that we give. And now I'm going to pass the baton over to Chauncey. You're welcome.
How's everybody doing again? I appreciate just being able to be in this space. Janine and I always get a big reaction about the grits because I'm from Chicago and I put sugar in my grits. But you don't. I just want to talk to you for a second about Ignite, Leading and Solving Student Barriers Through Equity. Ignite is a product of a grant that we received from Teaching for Tolerance, which is now Learning for Justice. And it was a $10,000 grant that was given to our office. The idea is that it is funding supporting high schools with student-led equity teams, and that all of those teams will participate in identifying an equity challenge that is in their locus of control at their school, and then they're working to resolve that challenge by the end of the year. One of the ways that we did that is that we had a 3-day camp this summer for them. And so introducing them to the product, speaking with parents, getting part of the community and the parent engagement with that, and then having an opportunity over one day to sit with the advisors of this group, teach them about equity, explain a lot of the programs and PDs that Janine was just speaking about, giving that directly to them in a very small, centralized way so that they walked back with an idea and a common language of equity based on Policy 1150. And then sharing that with their students, and then bringing the students in for 2 days over the summer to build team cohesion and work towards identifying their equity goals, and then how do they want to resolve it. One of the things we're most proud of is that students gave up 2 days of their summer to do that. And you know, that's a lot, and we always say students, but I also believe the parents gave those 2 days up too, because not every student could drive. And so that was a big part of what we wanted to do at Ignite. As you can see, it aligns to our equity policy, our strategic plan, and our practices. It is a big commitment to equity. That is the idea of the groups, and I love that they are focusing directly on that. We are encouraging effective partnerships with students and examining the issues related to inequities in our schools. I love that the students took hours to walk through different scenarios, to walk through different incidents, to have engagement with each other and with their adult advisors, who are also educators in the building, to say, here are some of the areas where maybe we are strong in terms of engagement with each student. Here are some other areas that we really could work on together. How do we resolve that? How do we make this a place where every single student feels seen and feel heard? We try to disrupt the disproportionality for student groups, because one of the things we've encouraged these groups to do is to expand their reach by engaging with other groups within the school to have these conversations. So don't just have the conversation in one silo, but take the conversations you're having, the knowledge you've learned through equity and through the training, then engage your beta club, engage your National Honor Society, engage your football team, engage the other areas of the school so that this information isn't sitting in a silo and never really dispersing amongst the student body. We're systemically and systematically centering their voice in various ways. So not only are they meeting with their teams to resolve the equity challenge, they're also meeting with administrators. I just had a meeting a few weeks ago at a high school where they were sitting down with the school counselor who's over a club at the school to say, how can we increase diversity in this club? How can we make sure that every student is made aware of what's involved here? And then what are the long-term effects of students being in this club? And how do we make sure that people who are identified are eligible for this club receive this access? So I love that this group of small students is already expanding that reach into the entire student body. And then we're creating brave spaces. One of the big parts of Ignite is that they aren't just meeting to talk about only Ignite issues. And I'm a walker, so I hope that doesn't bother you. But they also have to have a space where they can decompress, where they can talk about some of the issues that they're facing daily, every day at the school. And so this creates a brave space for them to do that and to engage one another and engage with the staff who's with them. These are some of the pictures from our summer camp that we had with them. As you can see, we had a multitude of students. This one young lady here ended up, her dad was a teacher in Wake County. He ended up leaving the county right after the camp. She was so impressed and engaged with the work that she took it to her school in Johnston County and started an equity team, using the information that we'd given her to talk them. So I love that. And then she still connects with the equity team at her high school that came to the camp so that she can make sure they're still practicing the same equity challenges, the same equity goals, that they're still practicing equity daily at their school and their group. So I love, again, the reach that students have with each other. Because sometimes there are places we can't quite get to. This is a picture here of all of the students and the advisors who came. The other thing I think we were most proud of with Ignite is that this wasn't just teachers. You see media specialists, you see history teachers, you see people who are doing art in this photo as advisors. And I love that. We have a foods teacher who's in our facts, I'm sorry, who's also one of our advisors with the group. So we're not just hitting one area. We're impacting multiple departments within the school just from the basis of having these conversations. That's it.
And the only thing I think I want to add to Ignite, Mr. Hatcher, is that you're working with 5 schools in the district based on the grant, and this is a pilot to hopefully extend this to other schools. The students also analyze and look at multiple data sources as they're thinking about like their problem of practice or what they want to take on as their equity-focused challenge. And to take that on to think about the context of their school, their community, and how they would work collectively with the different groups at the school.
And just to give you an example, Roseville High School last year, before we had the Ignite program on their own, they saw an inequitable challenge of young ladies in the restroom, and they didn't have feminine hygiene products. And so something as simple as a feminine hygiene product, there are some young ladies who don't have access to them. And so what the students did, they reached out to the community and they received hundreds of donations. They went out and bought very discreet bins for every girl's bathroom in their school, and they just kept them replenished and stocked them with products for young ladies so they didn't have to be embarrassed to go to the nurse to ask to borrow some, or if they didn't have the money to purchase them from the nurse, they removed the barrier by just having them provided for young ladies at the school. And the students took that upon themselves, boys and girls, to create that way to interrupt that system. And so that's what Ignite does. It ignites leadership in young people to solve issues that directly affect them as students.
Our 5 schools are Apex in the southwestern area, Enloe in the central, Roseville in the eastern area, Sanderson in the northern, and Heritage in the northeastern.
Very impressive work, Dr. Perry Campbell and Mr. Hatcher. Wish we had more time to delve into all that you're doing. Quick question before we transition to our school mental health plan. Who initiates you coming to a school? Does the school reach out to your office, or do you use the data to identify schools where you need to do the work?
So that question is both. So we've had the opportunity to present at principals meetings, AP meetings. There are principals who have continued the equity work when the policy came out and even prior to the adoption of the policy. So they'll reach out to Teresa. She coaches building leaders, and then Teresa forwards us the information. And collaboratively, we begin to forge partnerships with schools. When we've gone out to do AP meetings and principal meetings, principals will come back and say, we want you to come back to our school. We need this at our school. We do thought partnering with principals, and they sit down and provide us data to see which plan of action best meets the needs of their schools. And then we also have data that we look and see where large gaps exist, and sometimes we do reach out to principals to say, we're here as a resource if you need it. We offer this training, we offer this support. We are invited in, but there are some schools we're working to push in to help to interrupt those disproportionate outcomes that are occurring.
Ms. Johnson-Osler?
Thank you for giving us the list of schools. I'd be remiss if I didn't note that I have a school that is largely Black and Latino students, and none of those schools you listed are largely schools with students of color. And for me personally, I think it's important to note that there are a lot of equity disparities that happen just because the teachers don't reflect them, the school culture doesn't reflect them, which is largely, in my personal opinion, an equity issue for the students who are in that building. So that is my personal plea, is to see those schools, especially our high schools. Again, I've watched, fortunately, the work of our high schools grow, especially during COVID, the work that they've done. And being at the school, particularly two schools, I think those students would hugely benefit not only from the opportunity to have access to this, but a huge culture shift in their buildings to reflect the students there.
Truly agree. And I do want you to know, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the grant, we do want you to know, my predecessor, Teresa Bunner, wrote the grant, so I have to give her credit for that. So the money was received pre-COVID, and so Cindy, she's helped to keep it going so that we could use it. And so with the timeline of the grant, we were at the deadline to use the funds. We had to identify schools who had operating, sustaining groups, and these were the 5 schools that we knew that had groups. However, what you're saying is very valid, and so our goal for next year to sustain this program is to have a school in each of our 9 areas. And there will be an application process to make sure that it is equitable. So the first thing is that we have to ensure those schools who need the support, they're creating student teams, because that is a caveat of the grant.
Yeah. My concern, I think, is actually before the grant, is these are schools that don't often think they need an equity team because the student population is Black and Latino. So that's my concern, is how do we do the front end work to actually say, oh, actually, yeah, you do actually still need this team. So before the grant process, I'm more concerned that those schools don't actually have a team because there's an assumption culturally that they don't, and I disagree with that.
And that's part of the work that I believe Chauncey and Julian are trying to do, to support leaders. In addition to our office, there are some other pockets of programs that we're also doing with schools that don't necessarily fit the Ignite program structure, that we have other cohorts for, that we are having these conversations and creating audacious goals around how might we use students as a vehicle for that change, and one of your schools, high schools, is a part of that.
Perfect. I'll add teachers to that too. Some of you have heard me say probably some of the most profound work when I got on the school board is, and you certainly will remember this, is we had our teachers invested in the racial equity training, and most profoundly to me as a Black former student in a K-12 education system was actually from a Black teacher not noting her own internalized biases that were being reflected in her classroom. And so again, it matters that we do this work regardless of our race or ethnicity in the ways that it disproportionately still impacts Black and brown students.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Johnson-Osler, good point. So we hope to have you back again to dig deeper into your work, but truly appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Dr. Wilson-Norman, are we ready
Remove
to
that sugar
transition?
from your grits.
Can't do it. I don't know how you eat dry corn without sugar.
I don't even eat grits and I'm a Southerner. So I'm just giving you a hard time.
Well, you know, it's from Chicago, the Great Migration. All of my grandparents were all
from the South,
Southerners.
yeah,
My mom
of
is
course.
from Mississippi. My dad's from Mississippi. So
to our strategic plan and the work that we have underway, but also thinking about some of the work as we really deepen the behavioral health concept, not just as an idea, but how does it prove to be a body of work from the district office to schools to support students. So we want to share some of that work today. So I'll turn it over to Michael Pesh.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Pesh, Director of Social Work. Thank you for having us here today. Oh, you're good. And also with us, we have Dr. Corliss Thompson-Drew, who's our Director of School Psychology, and Cam Lopes, who's with Special Education. She's the Director of Social Behavior Program and Extended Content. She's with us today as well to help address any questions that come up. So in today's presentation, we just want to cover a couple of things. We want to definitely give you an overview of what the requirement is from the state for the school improvement mental health plan, and also be able to tell you what our district has put together and submitted to the state on the district level, as well as talk about how this all connects to the strategic plan now. So first, we'll start with the strategic plan. This is seated in priority 2, which is the student dispositions and well-being, and also speaks to these two goals of goal number 4, attendance, and goal number 5 of student well-being. We've probably seen this diagram many times, but it's worth reviewing again. This is basically an overview of behavioral health. So when we talk about behavioral health, we're talking about social emotional learning, we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about behavior. But today, we're going to focus mainly on the mental health aspect of behavioral health. And also, it fits nicely into the multi-tiered systems of support model that we use throughout the district. So our mental health services provide core services and support to all students, also provide supplemental support to some students, and then also interventions and intensive interventions for a smaller group of students. I think it's important to give you a little bit of context. We have talked about this for the past 3 years, but we only talk about it usually once a year when we get ready to submit the plan in September. So I want to give you a little context. This is going back to June of 2020 when we had Session Law 2027 that was approved by the General Assembly. Is an act requiring that the State Board of Education adopt a school-based mental health policy and requires all K-12 public school units to adopt and implement a school-based mental health plan that includes mental health training program and specifically suicide risk referral protocol. Then following that, the North Carolina Board of Education adopted SHLT 003 and the school-based mental health policy that aligns with this legislation. So the intention of the policy is to support students with the mental health component of behavioral health while further training the staff to be able to identify students who may need more intensive support services in the school. And then also that being able to connect those students and the families to the resources either at school or in the community. The policy does not direct us to provide any type of service that is beyond the scope of practice for what the school-based staff are already doing. There are some things we need to enhance, but it doesn't ask us to do anything that we're not supposed to do as school-based staff. The improvement plan has 9 components, and today we're just going to talk about a few of them, the ones that are highlighted here. And these are the ones that most directly impact direct services to students as well as the reporting protocols. So first we have the reporting to DPI component, which is an annual report that's submitted to as part of the Healthy Active Children Progress Report and School Mental Health Policy Report. It's due on September 15th. We just submitted that this past September, and our first one was submitted on September 15th, 2021. The first component I want to highlight today is the one that's about early intervention for mental health and social emotional health and wellness. Here you're able to see some of the areas that we have met that is required for our district, and in here is an annual review of our crisis intervention practices. It also includes the identification of methods for strengthening the district's response to mental and social emotional health, as well as substance use concerns in the school. An annual review of the district's discipline policies and practices, the identification of strategies to avoid over-reliance on suspension and expulsion. We do this mainly through restorative practices. and also the inclusion of our district in the local community emergency preparedness plan. And we have that crisis intervention plan embedded in the district's emergency operating plan. Some areas that we have several areas of growth for early intervention, and some of these are, we have the comprehensive plan for equitable discipline, CPED. We added mediation responsibility to our instruction specialist positions to support student mediations. And we have an expansion of behavioral health business case where we added 319 MOEs for school psychologists, social workers, and counselors. Of course, those were all temporary, and we're hoping to make this permanent. Something happened with this? Okay. I'll just keep going. And then some other areas that we need to continue to work on. One is with Senate Bill 605. This just passed at the end of last school year, and it requires all districts to have threat assessment teams, which we have had for many years, and also to create peer support groups, which we have not done, but we are in the process of working on through the use of youth mental health first aid and teen mental health first aid programs across the district. We also now have 2 permanent positions to improve staff wellness, and they are based out of the Human Resources Office. They started out as contract workers, and they're now permanent district employees. We also had our first summer behavioral health retreat this past summer, where we brought schools together to help develop team goals and strategies to address behavioral health issues at schools. And we are reviewing hiring and retention data to ensure that we have high-quality student services staff in all schools. So I'm going to move over to the other components of stakeholder engagement and referral, treatment, and reentry. We are meeting the expectation to increase student access to mental health with the pilot of the school-based mental health program we started about a year and a half ago. I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about that in a few minutes. We're also monitoring and improving the way that we refer students to our existing programs through Alliance Health. And we're working to improve our practices with daily and weekly briefings that we get from Alliance Health when students are in a mental health facility and they're exiting there, being discharged, and returning to our schools. So another couple of areas to focus on for areas of growth are our access to our mental health referrals through Alliance and our school-based mental health referrals. Let's see, we had the pilot phase of school-based mental health that started at 28 schools. Now we're up to 40 schools in total. I want to talk a little bit about this here. So right now we're at 40. We had the ambitious goal when we started this to have phase 2 be at half of our schools, but because of a lack of providers in the community, this is where we are right now. We're hoping to be able to increase this, and one way that we can do this is through teletherapy. Right now we're only doing in-person psychotherapy in schools. If we were to increase that, it wouldn't be the main way that we do it. It would be a supplemental method of treatment. Right now, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools has instituted that, and Guilford County Schools. This year, they started teletherapy in all of their middle and high schools. So just worth noting that.
And they have a hotline in Guilford.
And they do, yes ma'am. And then our final area is the area of suicide risk and referral protocol. We're meeting the guidelines here of being able to identify and assess students for suicide risk. Of course, this is not an area that doesn't mean we can't grow further, so we're continuing to enhance this area by doing additional training for families, administrators, and staff. And we're going to, we've now also started a crisis safety management, says leadership team. It should be a collaborative that we use to review all of our protocols. We're also starting prepare training for a small group of schools in the district. So at this time, I'd like to pause and see what questions you might have.
The telehealth, what is needed for that, for this district, if we wanted to do that? Sure. On a large scale?
So we would need permission to do that. There's some concern that there is some liability with that because we can't always guarantee what's on the other side of that screen. We've talked to a few providers who, it's not just the technology and what device they're using, but making sure that there's no one else around there that can be a part of the student very confidential work. So it's been more fear of what that entails. But they would do the same as any other provider, and they would bill the client. It wouldn't be a cost to us whatsoever.
Do Charlotte Meck and Guilford have that same fear? Because it sounds like we're potentially putting up a roadblock that others have been able to navigate around.
They've instituted it.
Okay.
I will say that, I've talked to the providers who are actually doing it in Guilford, and they're willing to pitch a proposal to us. And so we have done that, and we're getting ready to move that forward to chiefs with a briefing.
And so what I would say is that ultimately, I think we would talk with legal to say, how do we want to mitigate the potential risk? And, that is what they're there for.
For therapists, we would sue them. It's not hard.
The other two items, and I would ask that maybe this be brought to safety and security at the end of the month, is occasionally I'll get a parent who asks about the mental health aspects of Code Red drills and the impact it has on their child and other kids. And I'm wondering if we have evaluated that at all. I know we have to continue Code Red drills, but what impact is that having on our students? I don't need a big answer now, but I would ask that maybe that come.
It's a great question, and that can be a trigger for a lot of people,
Right.
adults as well, right?
Correct.
So, and it's not just Code Red, but it could be fire drills, tornado drills, all kinds of things like that. So one of the good things we mentioned about youth mental health first aid, that helps bring awareness to staff. It's not trying to help staff diagnose or treat individuals, but just have that awareness. So if they see a student who's behaving a certain way, some students will come out and say, I need to speak to someone, but others may not. And so being able to recognize some of those signs through the youth mental health first aid training is going to help us get a hold of those students and be able to talk to them.
And even if there's some way to let families know that after a Code Red drill, if a student needs to have, I think that would be.
Place to go to.
Yes, an immediate, because it could be an immediate trigger, or a way even to get out of a Code Red drill because it is that damaging to a child. I don't know what's possible. And that's why I said we can bring it to a different meeting.
I love that point, and we just had our crisis and safety leadership collaborative meeting today, and that would be an item that we could put on that. Because we have crisis and safety department staff there, and we can easily try to work on something with them.
The other item related to mental health that I wanted to ask about is, earlier we heard that there was a study on early start times and student achievement. And I'm wondering if there's a study or what we know about getting up at 5 o'clock to catch a bus and what that does to not just academics, but the mental health side of our students.
And I think it depends on the age of the child as well. So, the sleep cycles of a 5-year-old versus a 15-year-old is very different, as we all know.
We just had this conversation.
Yeah. So, yeah, there is some research behind that, and that's important to consider too.
And I'd love that to be brought to the table when we're discussing transportation and potential changes to, I don't know that we really talk about that as part of the conversation. Mainly, as I said that as a board member amongst the board, because I hadn't really thought about that aspect of it when we talked about bell schedules earlier, but that's come up more recently.
It's a big issue, especially when it affects attendance.
Right.
Yeah, I was about to say, I
absolutely.
think that's actually been a bigger issue for people is mental health, not grades.
I think sometimes when people think attendance, they think you were out for the whole day versus you keep
Right.
In that class.
missing. Right.
I was kind of separating academic achievement, attendance, and then the mental health part, but yeah, 100% attendance as well.
But they all kind of go together.
Yes,
I was just
for
about to say
sure.
they're not
For
really
sure.
separate. And I think that's a difficulty with mental health. These things aren't separate for the individuals. We separate them, but in the mental health profession, we say that those are false silos that people create when they're really whole people. And you can't actually really separate them, as Michael smiles at me, so. So they're not actually separate. But I do have a question that I haven't actually asked Michael before. When you're ready, Ms. Waters.
Oh, please.
So I'm glad to hear we're back to having the conversation. You all know I'm competitive, so when I knew Guilford beat us to this, I had slight issues. And everybody here, this, before you know, but the rest of you, I brought this to us when Guilford did it. So I'm slight competitive, so I have lots of thoughts about us doing this. But one of the other questions, and we talked about mental health first aid, which I think is helpful, but one of the things, Ms. Caulfield and I, so Garner is building their new hospital, which will have beds for our young people with mental health, excuse me, needs immediately. So Ms. Caulfield and I were at an event, and we've heard this before, but I haven't brought it to this group of people. It's an ongoing concern that we don't actually partner with our community resources, and we literally had 2 or 3 people walk up to us and say, excuse me, we've been asking Wake County to work with you all. I mean, and this is the hospital, and other mental health professionals in the room say, I mean, we have almost 200 schools. I'm not sure we should be saying no to anyone to come in our buildings and help us move past 40 schools, but that 100% of our schools have had mental health, at least mental health first aid. One of the things that they said, which Ms. Cash said at the board table every single board meeting almost, was the number of our kids who could have had early identification of suicidal ideations before they end up in the hospital. Almost all of them report that it started and they told someone in the school. And we had an actual doctor share an experience with us that her daughter was confided in by another student. The student knew which person to go to in the building, no disrespect, but they were like, it's not gonna be the school counselor, it's not gonna be the social worker, I'm gonna go to a teacher I trust. And this particular kid did, and the teacher was able to actually do an intervention. But that doesn't happen if the teacher feels uncomfortable and says, thanks Cheryl, but Monica's gonna need to go talk to Mr. Pesh. I mean, that one, it's not gonna happen. Monica's not gonna talk to Mr. Pesh. But the second piece of it is, I mean, these were concrete examples that they provided to us that they know of personally, that to encourage us to take advantage of the supports that they have to offer.
And if I could add on to that, one of my questions is going to be about our counselors. Exactly, if you could tell us, one, exactly what do they provide our students and staff? And then the other thing is, like, when you're looking for somebody who is going to be a therapist or somebody to talk to, we know that it is, you have to find the right fit, right? And when you're in school, you are assigned a counselor. It may not be the right fit. But do we give the flexibility to the schools to allow them, or is it structured by, you have A to Z, these are your 100 kids?
Yeah.
And sorry.
So a couple questions here, I'll try to address all of them. So in terms of our partners in the community, with the school-based mental health program, that is one vehicle to get people to come to the school. So we would invite them to be able to propose, send us a proposal, and we would love to have that and entertain that.
They've already sent us multiple texts, I'll let them know.
Okay, thank you. We need that help. We need that help. We just can't have them come in outside of that process. I hope everybody understands that, because that is there to protect both parties. Decades ago, and we could speak to this, is we used to have kind of an open door policy to let providers come in, individual therapists come to the school and see their client, and it became very complicated to manage. So that's why we're at this one portal system for school-based mental health. But yes, please send me the information. In terms of what counselors, social workers, and psychologists can do, again, just like I said with this plan, they're not asking us to do anything outside the scope of practice. Some of our staff are clinically licensed and some are not, and there's a huge difference in that. And what clinically licensed means is that you can diagnose and you can treat a mental health disorder. None of our staff, even if they are clinically licensed, are able to do that according to the job description that we have from the state. So the limit of our role is to provide coping skills, but not necessarily clinical practice and services. So we all use therapeutic skills, and we help students and families therapeutically, but we're not engaging in a mental health plan with them to treat a mental health disorder. So that's why we're bringing the therapists. There are some school systems that have been innovative and have made some of their staff from student support services provide the therapists in the schools and not just use outside providers. So there's different ways to do it. We're choosing outside providers because there is a little bit of role confusion when you do that. If you have someone in a school, you have to wear your therapist hat, and then you have to wear your kind of traditional school social worker, psychologist, or counselor hat. And it can be difficult to navigate that. With schools who have maybe several counselors, I've worked in systems like that, especially high school when you have 5 or 6. We will kind of determine this person needs this type of personality or this individual, and we will shuffle students around that way. But in a school where there's just one person, they're kind of the dedicated person who has to serve that student. But again, they're not providing that clinical service, and we can always refer them out for that level of service. But we do try to meet needs and switch students out. Even though they have an alphabet and they follow things, it's not uncommon to have that person see somebody else.
I think that's one of the biggest problems that I'm hearing is that they don't want to go to the counselor because they don't feel comfortable talking to that person. So if they're, like that gentleman was giving us that example, what if you don't have that go-to? And I find that most that talk about it don't have that person. So then what are we doing about that? Because we can have like, well, this in play, but if it's not effective, then it's really not helping the abundance of mental health that we have right now, especially in our high schools, you know?
Yep.
I think as we continue to work on building relationships and the kind of environments that we want in schools, so we're talking specifically now about mental health, but as we think about kind of the baseline of the kinds of environments that we want to build through our trainings with teachers, principals, so that kids are connected. That sometimes they don't want to go to counselors because they don't know who they are. They only go to them for a schedule. And so thinking about how do we go about creating those open doors for building those types of relationships. I think when we heard Will and his team speak about some of the student leadership offerings when we think about high schools, or when we think about what are some of the practices as we think about engagement for elementary schools. And so Michael and team shared a lot about the mental health requirements for the plan that we have submitted to the state. But as we come back throughout the year and begin to engage in even more robustly in the strategic plan, as we begin to bolster behavioral health, we're really beginning to look at how are we creating those student support services teams and how are we connecting with students and teachers within those buildings. And so as we think about social workers, counselors, we have behavioral support people, how are all of those people formulating a team, and not just the counselor, not just the social worker, but we're a cohesive team that services and supports students.
Good information.
Two more, if that's okay. Yeah. So with the suicide risk and the surveys and stuff that we do, is that a one-time survey, once a year they do that?
They do that as needed, if someone identifies someone as making a threat. But we also do the Signs of Suicide program as well. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. That's starting the 7th grade.
And when do we do that?
Signs of suicide are done at different times of the year depending on the school. And it's only certain grade levels. It's not every single grade. I think it's 7th, 9th, and I think we're looking at possibly 11th. Yeah, so that's a suicide, Signs of Suicide is an awareness program, but for the screenings, those are done pre-K all the way up. So if anybody exhibits any sign of threat to harm self or others, then we use our protocol immediately.
So is that something that is given out as a whole, or is it just
individual?
It's individual. Okay. And then you said Signs of Suicide and Awareness Program. That was one of the things I was going to ask you about. I'm just wondering, instead of children who could possibly be falling through the cracks because everybody's busy, everybody's got a lot of roles, everybody's got a lot on their plate, and those are often the children that get missed, right? So when you are dealing with something like that, I'm just throwing out there, wouldn't it be more proactive to have something that is more a program? Like, I remember when I was in high school, I'm not going to date myself or anything, but we had health, but we had like, we break it up into blocks here, right? Back then we had 8 periods, so you always had help all year long. And we would talk about drugs and alcohol all year long, like, and here's your resources all year long, rather than it just being like a program that comes in and talks about it in the spring or in the fall and the spring. Is there some way for us to get this where even the families are getting these resources continuously? Because you never know. I mean, it could be somebody, a parent at home, who receives these resources and they're recognizing the signs in their child that they may not have. Or it could be another student that's in a different grade, you know, or it could be the family that needs it, which will trickle down to the student. So I just think having those resources readily available, like always available, continuous, makes a huge difference. How do we do that?
So it is embedded in the curriculum at certain grade level, of course, the developmentally appropriate grade level. Suicide is not talked about only in signs of suicide, but it is part of the curriculum throughout middle and high school. We don't talk about that in elementary.
Right.
But there are other ways that we talk about self-care and being aware of your emotions and where to go for help, and that's done all the way from kindergarten up, your classroom guidance curriculum. So there are ways that that's managed in different levels, different grade levels. But one of the things we're talking about as we expand our services is we want to increase the awareness to families, increase the awareness to teens. So that's where teen mental health comes in. They're going to be able to have a peer support group and training so that students become more aware of what the signs are and what the resources are as well. And then the youth mental health is for the adults in the school to be able to have that awareness too. So those are some ways that we're trying to really enhance that, because I agree with you. We need to have those resources readily available all the time. And one of the things we started just this past month is we created a youth mental health collaborative. So we have a representative from every high school that we just met with last week. And one of the things we talked about is we're creating mental health awareness posters, and they're going to go into all the high schools. So we're starting to do some of these more creative ways to get student voice involved in the process too. Yeah.
And then with the Code Red, I think going even more off of what you said, Sam, like especially children with like sensory processing, that could like, you're throwing off their entire day. If not, they don't want to go back to school the next day, right? So, I mean, you could also have like one-on-one type of training where, and I don't mean you're going to throw the student out and have a training, but if you knew that you had, say, you know, one child in this class, just to give them heads up. Remember we were talking about, you know, hide and seek, we're going to do that game today, and just like giving them the awareness beforehand. I think just having that, just that little technique of this is what, you know, you can do when you have children in the class like that. I know that when you're doing fire drills and stuff, it's supposed to be, oh, here it comes, and you're supposed to learn from that. But when you have a child that has sensory processing and they just freeze, or they kind of disrupt the whole process because now they're in such a panic mode that you can't get these kids to move on, and now it's affecting other kids around them. Sometimes that does become part of the danger, right? Because you're not able to get everybody out single file and do what they're supposed to do. So is that something that they could put?
I don't know. That would be a question for safety, because I don't know what warning and alert that they can give schools to an exact minute. So that would be a question for them.
But Michael, if I
Yeah, sure.
may, so what you're talking about, and there's a lot of research around this, is that, and guidance about how we prepare our students for these drills, because we're living in an era now where all kids are going through different kinds of drills. There's a lot of research and guidance around that. I think what we can do is we can bring it back to a district emergency team where Kendrick Scott sits on that as well, and begin to think about how we can potentially use some of that as part of our protocols, because we do know from the research that it creates a heightened sense of anxiety among our kids, the world we're living in, and the fact that we have drills and all these kinds of things. So the guidance is, as school districts, what can we do, right, to sort of prepare kids beforehand, also accounting for kids who are auditorily have sensitivity, and doing those kinds of things so that they can at least be expecting or have a little bit more comfort around that.
Right.
But again, we can bring that back to the collaborative, and as we are working on our protocols, begin to incorporate some of that
are close to time, but I would like to ask one final question, if I may. A lot of the mental health needs of our students are impacted by their physical needs, such as housing security, food security, even clothing security. So what does that look like in terms of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so, as in the social work department, we have our McKinney-Vento liaison who works with people who are experiencing housing issues. And then also we have, we work with the schools to monitor food pantries. We work closely, just had a meeting this past week with Wake County about how to bring more food to students, not only in schools, but how to get student food to families at home. So we understand the connection between those basic, fundamental types of things like food, housing, and safety, as that's what serves as the foundation for a lot of other mental health issues. So we have other programs that we're working on. It's not part of the mental health improvement plan per se, but we have programs and activities in place to address those issues.
Well, thank you. Perhaps at some point we'll be able to delve into what that looks like.
Sure.
Well, as our time draws nigh, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge someone who's made great contributions to the Student Achievement Committee. Ms. Katrina Merrill has a great opportunity to have a new adventure in her career and to continue to grow. And so I would be remiss if I didn't thank her for all that she's done to support this work. Quietly, humbly, behind the scenes, but very diligent and very observant and very sure to make things go smoothly and properly. So we are very excited for your new adventure and look forward to continued relationship with you as you continue to grow. So thank you. And on that sweet note, we will adjourn. And our next meeting is scheduled for December 6th. So hope to see you there.